Okay, friends, so a couple of you have asked me really good questions about kind of a couple weird components of my grading system. The first is what happens if I do more than the 10 mandatory quizzes I have to do. So I made up a fictitious test student here, and I made it kind of a fictitious place in the course where they've turned in exam 1 and project 1. So I'm guessing this is somewhere around week 6. Let's give them some exam scores. Let's give them a 95 and let's give them a 25 on the project. So if you get a 95 on the exam, that means you've got a 95 out of 100. And if you've got a 25 on the project, you've got a 25 out of 25. Part of the spreadsheet that I'm hiding from you right here is the, is the summing that I'm having the spreadsheet do. I'll just show it to you here in case you want to see it. All right, so you end up with 120 total points out of 125 possible points. That's what these two add up to, 120. And since they're out of 125 respectively, that's the total of 125. Okay, so that gives you 96% at this point in the grade, which is a letter grade of A. All right, let's throw some quizzes in and see what happens to the grade as we go. Now, every time I add a quiz grade, what that does is it's going to add 9 points into your sum, which is your points, but it's going to add 10 grades, it's going to add 10 points into the total. So when I added that 9 there, the 125 popped up to 135 because it's out of 10 points, this quiz is. And you got 9 more for your sum. Okay? Quiz 2, let's say you get a 10 on it. They're both going to go up by 10 that time. Let's say you get a 10 on quiz 3 as well. All right, good stuff. Now, let's just say you get a 1 on quiz 4, just to throw a number in, just to play with a number. Okay, if you do this, you know the sum is going to go to 150. And you know the total is going to go to 165. Again, because the sum is your points, and the total is all the possible points. Sorry about the acronyms. That's what I use in my own spreadsheets. Okay, here we go. Now you can see what just happened to your percent. You're still in A range. That's great. You're still in A range, but you just dropped 5 percentage points because of that 1. And this brings up another point. There's a reason I make the quizzes individually optional. Because if you're doing this quiz, there's a couple different ways you could get a 1 on a quiz. You could think you're doing it brilliantly. Absolutely. You could think you're doing it brilliantly, and you could totally tank it. Which is, it happens to students. It happens. This is why we do the rainy day coupons. You can totally cash in a rainy day coupon, and you can fix that quiz and make it a perfect 10. I'll come back to that in a second. Or you can just not do it. And if you don't do it, your grade percentage and your grade letter don't change at all. They're just going to stay where they were. It doesn't go in as a 0. It goes in as it's not part of your grade. I guess it doesn't go in at all. So you can just skip quiz 4. And then you come over here and you can do, quiz 5, quiz 6, quiz 7, and so, quiz 7, and so forth. And you can do as many quizzes as you need. And you'll notice something too, because everything is based on points in this course. Let's suppose, you're coming down here, and let's see, we've done 7 quizzes so far, and there's 8 quizzes, and there's 9 quizzes, and there's 10 quizzes. Okay. Your grade stayed pretty consistently at 96. Let's suppose now you get to quiz 12 and you tank it. You get a 1. Well, you can see your overall average fell again, but it didn't fall as far this time. And that's because you have more points in the bank already, which means the 10 points that quiz 12 was worth is a smaller percentage of your overall total than it was when you only had a few quizzes. Okay, now some of you, this hasn't answered the question you originally asked, which was, what happens if I do more than 10 quizzes? So right now, if I'm doing the math right, we have done 10 quizzes. Yes, we've done 10 quizzes. Okay, so what happens if you do another one? Let's suppose you do quiz 12 and you end up getting a 9 on it. Well, if that's the case, your total and your sum just go up again. You get 10 more points into your total, you get 9 more points into your sum. So it's not extra credit. It's simply another part of your grade. Which leads some people to ask, well, why in God's name would I ever do more than 10? Well, the answer to that is, there's a few different answers to that, but a really good answer that pops up is, well, let's just suppose that you don't do stellarly on maybe the first exam or maybe even the first project. Like maybe you just get hit pretty hard with the exam and the first project. You're still trying to get used to the course and things aren't quite getting along for you. Well, the more quizzes you do, you might notice if we keep throwing quizzes in and doing well on them, you see what's happening to your average over there on the left. They're not extra credit, but because the ratio of the points that are offered and the points you're getting is 10 to 10, it's going to pull up that average, albeit a little bit slowly. It is going to pull that average up. This is also, again, a little shout out for rainy day coupons. For example, you might cash in a couple of them on this exam and get 10 points back. And that's going to pop your average up again. So there's a few things going on. One of them is the idea of doing more quizzes and how it can help pull your average up, which students will figure that out if you haven't already. That was the first question folks asked. I thought it was a great one. The second question that folks asked was, okay, your homeworks. I noticed that you don't require us to turn in homeworks, and that's true. I only started teaching stats online about 2.5 years ago. It was during COVID, and I didn't know how to approach homework because I had never used homework before in my classes. So I said, I'm going to make it optional, and I'm going to get back into kind of my logic of doing that. So when a student recently asked me, well, if it's optional, why would I even do any of it? I said, well, that's a really good question. Let me go into the data and see what actually happens. When I click over here, what you see is, well, this is all the students without their names, of course, all the students and all of the homework, the grades they got on the homework, I should say, not just the homeworks themselves. So these columns A through, S, are the grades they got on the homeworks. Column T over here is the number of homeworks each individual student in each row did. And then the column U right next to it is the final grade that student got in Math 243, the student that did that many homeworks. So you can see this top student did 7 homeworks, got 101 for the class. Okay, and if I look down, there's another student down here that did 7 homeworks. They got 103 for the class. This student right here didn't do any homeworks. They got a 74. This student down here didn't do any homeworks. They got an 11. Now, I've got a lot of students, so it's really hard to look at this data and try to figure out, like, is there any kind of a pattern going on? Like, as one number goes up, does the other number go up? So I decided to look at a graph, and that's what I did over here. And this is kind of interesting. This is what I kind of thought it was going to look like, but I wanted to check the data to actually see if it looked like this. So there are about 170 dots on that graph. You might not see them all because some are sitting on top of each other. But what you notice is, well, I notice a couple things. First of all, no matter how many homeworks people do, there's a potential for students to score very high. That's this kind of top part of the graph up here. So I've had students that have done no homework and gotten very high grades. You can actually see a couple of them right here to the left. This student here did no homework, got 103. This student here got no homework, got a 91. Now, why? Why would that happen? Well, there's a variable I'm not measuring here, and that's previous statistical experience. I've had some students in my classes that took stats, that even use stats in their daily life, but they have to take a stats course to get it on their transcript. So a lot of those kind of students come into my class and they already kind of know what they need to know, and then it's just a matter of them kind of going through and getting the grade, so to speak. Okay, that's one thing I've noticed. Another thing I've noticed is the low grades. And when I say low, I'm talking about 60 and below, maybe even if you want to call 70 and below a low grade. It depends on what you want to call low. But I noticed that the lowest grade in all the categories tends to rise up like this, which tells me that historically, students that do more homework have typically higher low grades. It's kind of a weird thing to say out loud. But you see how people that do no homeworks, their lowest grades historically are sub 20. People that do 4 homeworks, their lowest grades look like it's around a 50. Same with people that do 6 homeworks. But then when you get up to 10 and 11 homeworks, 9, 10, and 11, their lowest grade's about a C, about a 70. And then if you get above that, 12, 14, 16, their highest grade, or their lowest grades, excuse me, are about an 80. So you've got this little trend that shows us that the grades tighten the more homework someone does. Now, this can't prove that the homework is causing the highest low grades, but there is an association. It's called a correlation. Not a causation, but a correlation. So when somebody asks me, what's the point of doing homework? It really depends on the person. But historically, this is what I've seen. I hope that helps. If you have any other questions, feel free to shoot them over. Be well, y'all.